On this Sunday night, the trail of destruction.
The whole house lifted up off the foundation and then was dropped back down, yeah.
More deaths confirmed after a powerful storm system tore through parts of southern Ontario and Quebec.
It is something that everybody should be concerned about.
Plus, the outbreak of monkeypox, the latest crisis threatening to derail the Biden administration's agenda.
As female referees, we've always just wanted to be considered a referee.
And taking the field, female referees set to make history at the FIFA Men's World Cup.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Tracy Tong.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The death toll has risen to at least 8 after Saturday's devastating thunderstorm in southern Ontario and Quebec. Today, residents are still picking up the pieces. Dangerously high winds, heavy rain, and hail battered communities across the region, including the nation's capital. Hundreds of thousands are still without power. Ross Lord looks at the widespread damage and whether it's a sign of things to come with climate change on everyone's mind.
In Stittsville, Ontario, people are less concerned with what type of storm swept through their Ottawa area community than they are with the devastation it left behind, and how the weather changed so suddenly from idyllic to dangerous. Paul McMahon has lived in this house for 3 peaceful decades.
And then it's like, oh, get in the house. Because like in an instant, it just got really violent.
As he grinds through the thunderstorm's aftermath, McMahon says at least one of the family vehicles is a write-off from destruction more synonymous with an East Coast hurricane than a thunderstorm.
I don't know if that was like a microburst or anything like that or what it was, but I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Hydro Ottawa says 200 power poles were dislodged or destroyed. Even some transmission towers fell victim to a deadly storm that did similar damage in parts of Quebec. With freakish weather becoming more common around the globe, it's tempting to file these images under climate change damage. Or is it simply the result of seasonal forces?
You'd certainly see it in the springtime of the year when the warm air is never too far from the cold air, and they duke it out, and you get weather wars breaking out. We get extreme summer weather. I mean, we're the second most tornado-prone country in the world. We get maybe 3 or 4 tropical storms every year. We get lightning strikes, 3 million lightning strikes a year.
Back in Stittsville, residents are shaken, still trying to make sense of what they see.
Utter disbelief. You know, the tree was just uprooted and the car. Very hard to believe. The devastation and all around the streets.
This is not the way anyone wants to spend a holiday weekend that typically kicks off a carefree season. They hope it's a blip, not a harbinger of more turbulence over the summer. Ross Lord, Global News.
One of the areas hardest hit by this storm was the small town of Uxbridge, Ontario, which has now declared a state of emergency. The destruction there is so bad, it's fueled speculation that this was more than just an ordinary thunderstorm. Mike Drolet spoke with residents on how the terrifying conditions tore through their homes.
This section of the valley's all been hit.
There was a sense of wonder as Margaret Hall surveyed the damage behind her Uxbridge, Ontario home. More than 20 trees snapped in half, but Hall says all she heard were the 120 km/h wind gusts.
You didn't hear anything, all you saw was the results. Nothing. It was that intense.
The cleanup promises to be intense as well, with the most immediate concern untangling the power lines from the fallen trees.
We expect it to be out for a significant amount of time. So there's hundreds of trees down, if not thousands. And then we've got some buildings and roofing material on hydro lines. So there's a lot of work to be done.
This is what the storm's opening salvo looked like. In video taken from the air hours later, it's clear part of the town, about an hour northeast of Toronto, was hit by a more intense weather event.
Definitely lots and lots and lots of straight line wind damage, but this may be that one spot where everything came together to produce one of those tornadoes on the front end.
The damage is obviously pretty extensive here in Uxbridge, with trees ripped up and houses damaged, but the true measure of the power of this storm can be best illustrated here with this house. Witnesses say they saw it lift up into the air, and when it landed, it came down off of its foundation.
And while it's more evidence for the experts to consider as they determine what to call the storm, it's also someone's home. Like many others, it may soon be declared uninhabitable. Across the street, Jason Woodhams is waiting for the insurance agents.
I don't know. We're all in just shock right now. But yeah.
Is your initial impression that you're going to be able to fix it?
I don't think so. I think it's too far gone.
A brief storm that will leave its mark for years to come. Mike Drolet, Global News, Uxbridge, Ontario.
Stateside, the U.S. Northeast is sweltering under a heat advisory today. Record high temperatures are expected to hit New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and Connecticut after the mercury soared into the 90s Fahrenheit or mid-30s Celsius. Tourists are trying to beat the heat and high humidity by hitting the beaches in droves. However, a cold front Monday is expected to bring some relief from the scorching temperatures. U.S. President Joe Biden is in Tokyo, the latest stop on a tour of Asia. But as he's set to meet with Japan's prime minister, he's facing a growing chorus of criticism at home over his handling of a string of domestic challenges. Jennifer Johnson reports.
President Joe Biden arrived in Japan Sunday, kicking off the second leg of his trip to Asia, strengthening America's alliances to counter China's increasing power in the region. Back home, a cargo plane from Switzerland landed in Indiana, containing 1.5 million bottles of infant formula. A drastic shortage of formula has left millions of parents struggling to feed their babies. Dozens have been hospitalized.
I have never seen anything like this. They come in dehydrated, you give them IV fluids, and we can give them nutrition by vein, but that's not a long-term solution.
The delivery is a much-needed win for the Biden administration. A new Associated Press poll shows the president's approval rating is at its lowest point since taking office. Just 39% of Americans like the job he's doing. But Democrats are putting out a different spin as November's midterm elections loom.
This is a tough moment for our country, but President Biden has been very decisive in his leadership. We rescued the economy, put shots in arms, money in pockets.
But supply chain issues have led to skyrocketing consumer prices in the U.S. Everything from baby formula to household appliances are almost impossible to find. Inflation has hit its highest level in 40 years. Food prices are soaring. Gas prices are now the most expensive in U.S. history.
The prices are getting crazy.
$124, not even full tank.
That same poll shows only 2 in 10 American adults feel the country is headed in the right direction. Adding to Biden's woes, another rise in COVID-19 cases and a crashing stock market. Even America's biggest retailers like Target and Walmart are watching their profits take a steep dive.
Households are very nervous, and in response, they're trying to dramatically reduce their expenditures, and that affects the bottom line.
Most experts believe rising consumer prices will last well into next year. That will likely hurt Democrats in the midterm elections and possibly cost them control about the House and the Senate. And a Republican-controlled Congress will only make President Biden's job more difficult. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Ontario may have its first case of monkeypox. Health officials today trying to confirm the diagnosis in an Ontario man in his 40s. He is now in stable condition and is believed to have had contact with someone who recently traveled to Montreal. In Quebec, health officials there say they have 5 lab-confirmed cases, with 15 more being investigated. South of the border, at least 2 cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in the U.S., and President Joe Biden says the disease is something to be concerned about.
Well, they haven't told me the level of exposure yet, but it is something that everybody should be concerned about. We're working on it hard to figure out what we do and what vaccine, if any, may be available for it. But it is a concern in the sense that if it were to spread, it's consequential.
Coming up, the new challenge for bars and restaurants, already reeling from pandemic restrictions and closures. Plus, a scathing report looks at what went wrong at the site of one of Canada's deadliest COVID outbreaks. Russian forces are launching a major assault to tighten their grip on the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. Surveillance video captured the moment a missile impacted a grain facility in Dnipro. as the Russian military continues to target civilian and humanitarian infrastructure. After finally breaking the resistance in the strategic southeastern city of Mariupol, Russia appears to be launching a major offensive to seize all of Luhansk, one of 2 Donbas provinces. France's minister to the European Union says Ukraine's bid to join the bloc will take 15 to 20 years. That as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is insisting on an immediate start to the process for full EU membership. Polish President Andrzej Duda, who was in Kyiv, agrees, appealing to the EU to open its doors to Ukraine now. The French and German governments have pointed to the huge job of rebuilding the country's war-shattered cities and economy, as well as legal and economic reforms to reduce corruptions as key milestones for EU membership. Over 80% of COVID-related deaths during Canada's first wave happened in long-term care homes. And now a new coroner's report out of Quebec paints a devastating picture of how things unfolded at one of the hardest-hit residences. As Dan Spector tells us, advocates hope the lessons learned will help improve senior care across the country.
It's now deserted, but inside this Montreal building that used to be the Heron Seniors Residence, a pandemic horror unfolded that scarred this province, this country, forever.
It's very, very painful.
Paul Carniello is talking about learning the details of his grandmother's final days in the recent coroner's report into deaths in Quebec seniors' homes during the first wave of COVID-19. She and 47 other people died at Heron under deplorable circumstances.
It's extremely angering. It's extremely frustrating. And extremely hurtful to know somebody that willful and that unique and that tough would die with such little dignity and such little compassion and such little care.
The events at Heron have been subject to multiple investigations, but coroner Jehan Kamel's deep dive into the events is perhaps the most detailed and scathing yet.
En ce qui concerne Heron, les gens ont failli.
When it comes to Heron, people failed, she said. In her 200-page report, Kamel criticizes the disorganization of health authorities, noting the horror of allowing human beings to die in inhumane conditions, alone, malnourished, and in their own feces.
I'm not shocked by this. I'm not shocked by the info. I'm just disappointed and very frustrated.
The report says Carniello's grandmother did not die of COVID-19. She died due to the lack of basic care. As many staff deserted the residence, authorities communicated with lawyers and debated whether to call 911.
Decision makers need to be held accountable for the decisions that they took that led to this situation.
Kamel said even though the government knew seniors were among the most vulnerable to the virus, they chose to keep care homes in a pandemic planning blind spot.
Hopefully, Heron can be used as an example for change and for other places as well, and for other provinces.
Heron was taken over by the government during the crisis, and after the coroner's report, a top regional health official announced she'd step down from her role. The coroner's report has made 23 recommendations, and Kamel says the change recommended is owed to the seniors who died, their mourning families, and the thousands of healthcare workers who did their best in the face of the impossible. Dan Spector, Global News.
Well, after 2 very difficult years of pandemic-related restrictions and closures, restaurants and bars all across Canada are now facing another challenge. As Global's Amada Gahi reports, in BC, the struggling food services industry is now calling on the provincial and federal governments to take action to help alleviate a crippling labor shortage.
Patios are critical to us, to be honest, because we go from maybe 85 seats on the inside to upward of 130 seats with patios.
And on this sunny afternoon, the patio at Romer's in Vancouver's River District filled up soon after opening. You would think it's a sign that business is good, and it is.
Always ready for a busy weekend. Good for you guys.
But ahead of May-long weekend, this type of demand has BC restaurants feeling the crunch of a now historic labor shortage.
I've never seen a time and place in my 40 years in the industry like it is today. We're short about 30%.
The BC restaurant industry estimates it needs 30 to 35,000 workers. On the heels of the pandemic worker exodus, there's also belief that processing delays on foreign worker applications are a factor keeping jobs vacant.
Everybody's short workers, and the big solution for us is to get this foreign workers program in place and acting as it should.
The BC Restaurant Association wants the province to ask Ottawa for an exemption to what's called the Labour Market Impact Assessment, which confirms there is a need for a temporary foreign worker for any given job, and that there is no Canadian or permanent resident available to do that job. This would be temporary and could help fill the void by speeding up the process.
We're pushing the feds not only to reduce the time, but we're also pushing them to give us more levers and more say in what type of workers we need, because we know what we need.
Working all these hours sometimes drains you. It's very exhausting also.
I was working 7 days a week. Now I'm down to 5 days a week. But I mean, that's what you got to do when times are tough. You got to help each other out and fill in spots when needed.
Y'all ready for a big weekend, Kate?
Oh yeah, you know it.
In the meantime, those already picking up the slack will continue to ask for patience, especially during the busy weekends ahead. Emad Agahi, Global News.
Women run the World Cup. Ahead, the first female referees of soccer's biggest tournament. Just 6 months until Canada's men's national team will make its first appearance at a FIFA World Cup in 36 years. And this tournament will also be making history by having female referees take charge of men's World Cup games for the very first time. Redmond Shannon reports.
Referees warming up together just before the last Men's World Cup, a boys-only club for almost a century. That is, until now. FIFA says for the first time, 3 of the 36 referees at soccer's biggest tournament will be women, with 3 more female assistant referees along the sidelines in Qatar. Canadian Carol Ann Chenard worked at 9 different FIFA tournaments, including Olympic Games and junior male events.
As female referees, we've always just wanted to be considered a referee. But the opportunities over the last 4 years have just grown leaps and bounds across the world.
In many ways, this announcement is the end game, thanks to pioneers like Chenard. Women like her have been refereeing men at lower levels for years. But the World Cup will mark a new milestone, with the whole world watching. The head of FIFA's referees committee said, "I would hope that in the future the selection of elite women's match officials for important men's competitions will be perceived as something normal and no longer as sensational." The journey to get here has been about building experience, but also respect, something that hasn't always been shown to women in charge. In 2020, Argentinian star Sergio Aguero was criticised for putting his arm around a female official when he didn't agree with her call.
And of course, there are comments, oh, it's a girl, oh, it's a female, that kind of thing. And yes, there have been statements and comments made to me during a game, but I manage that just like I would any other type of statement.
It is remarkable that this progress is being made at a World Cup in Qatar, in a region where some countries lag behind in gender equality. Teams from Iran and Saudi Arabia could play their World Cup games with female officials, countries that until recent years banned women from even watching men play, never mind taking charge. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Finding your true fit. Next, the group helping people thread together their gender journeys. The clothes you wear can sometimes be a reflection of your personality, preferences, and identity. A student-led initiative is teaching members of Calgary's LGBTQ community how to alter clothing to make them gender-affirming. As Jill Croteau reports, some consider it a lifeline.
There's a saying that goes, you can have anything you want in life if you dress for it. What if that want is to simply be accepted as your true, authentic self, a desire to look how you feel on the inside?
Because this fabric is like stretchy.
That's why every stitch is so significant.
So I identify as a trans man, non-binary in that sense, but yeah, I transitioned from female to male when I was 15.
This workshop is organized by Threads That Thrive. It's run by SATE students for students, and it's where people learn how to alter clothes to fit their bodies, garments tailored to be gender-affirming.
It lights you up. Having something that I want to wear and represent myself in makes me feel like I want to get out of my house. And I think that's helpful for a lot of LGBT people who do suffer with agoraphobia, depression, anxiety, and other things that are so relevant to our community.
Shopping in designated men or women's departments can be intimidating and sometimes risky for those who are navigating their own gender journeys.
When you are a queer person shopping in a clothing store that maybe doesn't match your outward gender expression, fear of being outed, fear of being persecuted, it can be dangerous.
People are not always fitting into these neat little buckets. So it started years ago when they started acknowledging that, like, hey, not everyone is a size 0 to whatever. There are people that fall outside of that. So they started to make things maybe a bit more size inclusive. And now I think they are making strides towards making things more gender inclusive.
While they're learning the skills they need to make clothes that fit, turns out it's truly about the space that fits.
Life-saving, definitely. There's something in me that's still afraid that my right to be trans will get taken away. Like, they're going to take away my hormones, they're going to reverse my surgery and give me girl clothes again. And the fact that I know that I have the support there, it's not so much the clothing so much as the pathways that are opening up for me to get it.
Jill Croteau, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Tracy Tong. Tonight's Canada is the sunrise in Sylvan Lake, Alberta. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Colleen Christie will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.